Guys, this is a video that I've wanted to make for a very, very long time. Today, I have the top 25 of my favorite fighters of all time. I'm going to go through them, talk about why I love these guys, and maybe you can relate if you're a fight fan. Maybe you just want to hear a video about somebody's favorite fighters. I don't know. Just wanted to make this video because I've been on the platform for a very long time now. Regardless, we're going to get into that in just a second. Before we do, though, I do want to say hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels. Excuse the hat right now, guys. Waiting for my wife to get home right now. I have my child next to me. We gave her some crackers so I could record the videos right now. And I'm just going to take the dog out. It's insanely cold. It's winter now and over here in Canada. Regardless, guys, I have 5 honorable mentions for you. And then we're going to get into the list from 25 all the way to 1. All of my favorite fighters in MMA history. Now, I wanted to talk about the 5 honorable mentions because there are a few fighters that either I've recently become fans of or just like fighters that I've enjoyed watching, but not to the point where maybe I don't know them enough personally. Obviously, I don't know anybody personally, but you get the point. I factor in my favorite fighters with like excitement level. Also, the guys that I like to cheer for, guys that I think are like just like really cool people. Regardless, you get the point that I'm talking about. 5 honorable mentions for you, and the first one is going to be John Lineker. Now, this is a guy that I didn't necessarily appreciate back in the UFC days. Now, I know there was a suspension from John Lineker. This is another issue that I'm going to have throughout the list is because there was another time where fighters, everybody was on PEDs. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. I'm going to ignore all of that and talk about like that being a fan of these guys as time's gone on. So John Lineker, not only has he put on absolutely phenomenal performances, as you guys might know, One Championship is my favorite organization. This dude has been killing it over in One, and now he's over in Muay Thai, killing guys. This dude is a pleasure to watch. He brings a unique style to the Muay Thai realm that people have seemed to have a little bit of an issue with. So John Lineker is becoming a favorite of mine to watch, and it's just a pleasure every single time that we see him. But we do have another honorable mention over here for you guys, that being Petr Yan. Now, I have spoken about watching this guy. I've been a big fan of this guy for a very, very long time because his technique is just so pure. He's arguably the best boxer in the UFC. Everything he does, whether it's wrestling, grappling, kickboxing, uppercuts in general, like he's adding new tools to his toolkit all the time. This dude is just a pleasure to watch fight. Now, the reason he's only an honorable mention is because I don't know anything about Petr Yan. I don't listen to him in interviews, or I don't know anything about him, really, but because when you become a fan of someone, I like to also take a look at the guy personally. That's what's kind of holding Petr Yan back for me, but to watch this guy perform is an absolute pleasure. Petr Yan, absolutely an honorable mention. Now, continuing on, a fighter that is not yet one of my favorite fighters, but I can very well see by the time his career's over, him being on my own list over here. Paddy Pimblett, he's just fun. He's a ton of fun. Whether it's trash talk, whether it's hyping up the crowd, whether it's the fights in general, this dude brings some energy that I am absolutely here for when it comes to a UFC card. My mom and I love watching Paddy Pimblett fight. That's it. But then again, like I don't go like, oh yeah, I'm a huge fan of Paddy Pimblett. That's how I feel about it. But at the end of the day, guys, to be honest with you, like I have a problem even saying that like I'm a huge fan of people. And I don't know if this is going to sound cringe, but I'm one of those guys where it's like I look up to some of these fighters in the case where like I've done some tape study. We're going to get into a couple fighters with that where it's like I modeled my own fighting style off of a couple of these guys over here. And there was one fighter in particular that I really, really had an influence on my game. So I look up to them in that sense, but I don't really look up to like celebrities. And I know that these guys are way better than celebrities, obviously, but I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. I'm not somebody who really looks up to people. I look at these guys more so when I say I'm a fan of, and I respect what they do. Does that make sense? I always felt it's kind of weird, and especially like that I've grown up. Like in high school, I would have said like, oh my God, huge fan of this guy. And you look up to people in a sense, but as I've aged, I don't look up to anybody besides like my father and maybe my uncle, like that's pretty well it. I just hope you guys are getting what I'm putting down over here. So regardless, let's continue on to the next honorable mention. And it sucks that this one has to be an honorable mention, but Demetrius Johnson, it's because I didn't appreciate him while he was here when I first started watching the sport. I liked watching Mighty Mouse fight, but he was nowhere near a favorite of mine. Now that he's been over in One Championship and paying more attention to him, I've been listening to his podcast, I have come to really, really enjoy Mighty Mouse as a person. But this is all like within recent years. Can I really sit back and say like, hey, this guy's one of my favorite fighters of all time? Because I didn't pay like a ridiculous amount of attention to him as that I should have, and it's a shame in that sense. But regardless, Mighty Mouse is becoming a favorite of mine. And the biggest honorable mention we have for you guys over here is Renato Moicano. Like I said with Paddy Pimblett, I could see myself being a huge fan watching this guy once the time comes where his career is over. He's so fun on the mic. He's doing all the right things, promoting himself. He has fun fights. He's in a crazy division. He cannot afford to lose. I love watching Renato Moicano, and I respect what he's doing. I respect these guys a lot. That's the thing. Like but it's easier to just say I'm a huge. Excuse you. Like I said, I have my kid next to me right now. But as I was saying, it's just easier to just sit here and go, hey, I'm a huge fan of these guys, obviously. But with that being said, with the honorable mentions out of the way, guys, I present to you the top 25 of my favorite fighters in UFC history, starting off with the first fighter, and that first fighter being Beneil Dariush. This is a prime example of one of the guys that I was talking about in the sense where it's like I am a big fan of the kind of person that this guy is, a guy who fights to provide for his family. He absolutely, and I'm sure that there's a lot of other fighters like this, but he is so vocal about being family first. He's a fun fighter, and Beneil Dariush, I know he's in his old age now, but this guy has had some insanely exciting performances over the years. Before I was actually really paying attention to Beneil Dariush, every single time Dariush showed up, I was kind of like, this Dariush guy has some really solid fights. And then as time has gone on, I've only become a bigger and bigger fan of him. And I really respect Beneil Dariush. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. But with that, there are fighters that I do like more than Beneil Dariush. And that's another thing. I know it's like my top 25 favorite fighters, but I've been an MMA fan for well over a decade. I've been never missing an event, watching multiple promotions. So to be on my top 25 list, actually, like out of all of the fighters that I watch, I think it says something, okay? So I know just like some people might think that this top 25 is like big compared to something like a top 10. I watch a lot of fights, and I have over the years, okay? So I'm still Beneil, excuse me. But let's continue on over to number 24, Gegard Mousasi. It was a shame that he left the UFC when he did. My dad and I were a big fan of Gegard Mousasi because not only has this guy had some exciting fights over the years, but I believe that he is one of the greatest middleweights of all time. I was sitting here saying to you strongly, well, not to you, I didn't have a YouTube channel back then, but I wholeheartedly believe if Gegard Mousasi was given the opportunity to fight the Robert Whitakers, to fight the Israel Adesanya's, the Dricus Duplessis, he would steamroll them. I really do believe that. He is the best middleweight at that, along with Prime Jacare. And I'm also not one of those guys to be like, oh my God, just because he's a veteran, he's fantastic. I'm not being one of those guys. He seriously has all of the technique in the world. You're a good wrestler, Gegard can do that. You're a good striker, Gegard can do it better than you. Like, this dude and his technique is such a pleasure to watch into the octagon. I love how nonchalant he is. He comes in looking like he just could not care less. Like, it's another walk in the P-A-R-K. I have to spell that because my dog's right behind me. But, I love watching him, man. Gegard is awesome, and he's easy to cheer for. I've always enjoyed his fights. I'm glad he's over in Bellator, and I'm glad he's finally getting his contract problems figured out because I know that Gegard is obviously past his prime now, but I cannot wait to watch him again. He is one of my favorite fighters of all time. Let's continue on to number 23, and I had to have him on here, guys. Talk about fighters that are easy to cheer for. We have Alexander Volkanovski. First of all, Volk is sick. I just love the mindset he brings into fights, and in my opinion, Prime Volkanovski is, or was, the greatest fighter to ever grace the octagon. Prime Alexander Volkanovski, I believe, is the true MMA GOAT, and I love watching excellence, man. No matter what it's at, and MMA at its excellence with a guy who hasn't necessarily done any PEDs as far as we know, and the only reason I say that is because according to some fighters, everybody's on some sort of PEDs, and I still would imagine that could be the case, but I'm not accusing Volkanovski. I'm just saying, like, in comparison, because I just said that I loved watching greatness perform, then you could point to like John Jones, but we're excluding that. And I know I might sound hypocritical compared to a couple fighters that we might talk about down the road. Regardless, the reason that I say Alexander Volkanovski is the greatest fighter of all time is because of that, okay? I love watching excellence. I love just the walkout, come from a land down under. Like, Volkanovski just really brings it. He puts all of his heart into it, and cooking with Volk is sick to watch, by the way. Like, I just like Volk as a person, man. He's a great person. He's a great fighter. I love watching Alexander Volkanovski fight, and he is number 23 on this list that we have going on over here. Let's continue on over to the next fighter, number 22, Davison Figueiredo. Talk about just fun performances. Every single time this guy comes in the cage, it's high level, it's exciting. We've seen him go 5 rounds plenty of times. Like, the dude is one of those guys that's just easier to cheer for. Now, what's weird about it is I can't help but constantly cheer for the guy, but like I was talking with Piotr Jan, I don't know much about him. It's just, he's a fun guy. He comes in, he puts his heart out there, he fights as hard as he can, and it's like insanely high level. And every single time I know that Deiveson Figueiredo fights, I know that I'm in for a treat. So I do love watching Deiveson Figueiredo fight. He is in the number 22 spot. Let's continue on to number 21, Jim Miller. Again, in my opinion, one of the easiest fighters of all time to just cheer for. I've been cheering for this guy ever since probably like his fight with Joe Lozon back in the day. As of right now, I'm almost sure he has the most fights, right? Yeah, he did end up breaking that record. And he's on his way to breaking the octagon time. I don't know. It's ridiculous, man. The accomplishments that this man has had. I wanted him to win on UFC 300 so bad. He won on UFC 100, 200. Cheering for him at UFC 300, man. But he's just another guy, man. Very, very easy to cheer for. Very respectable guy. Knows about the MMA game, and carries a lot of knowledge with him. He has fought the toughest of the tough. He is a true veteran in the sport. And while he is in his old age now, still picking up some wins. At the time of recording this video, he just snagged another really quick win. Love watching Jim Miller fight. Love Jim Miller. He's sitting at number 21. But let's continue on to a fighter that has been giving me a little bit of a struggle to be a fan of recently. Number 20, Kelvin Gastelum. I'm not going to sit here and talk about all of the wasted potential that this man has, but it is accurate. I've been watching this guy since he entered the UFC. And I've really just enjoyed him as a person. I think he's a great guy. He's very respectful, very humble. The only issue is he is wasted talent. He is wasted potential. But at the end of the day, every single time that Kelvin Gastelum enters that octagon, I sit down and I cheer for him so hard. I want him to succeed. I want him to get on that mission for gold. I want him to complete that mission for gold. Maybe one day. Unfortunately, I have lost hope, but I still am a fan of the person that Kelvin Gastelum is, and he has all the talent in the world. It's just, unfortunately, a little bit of discipline issues. Let's continue on to number 19. Another OG, OG in compared to when I started watching the sport, Anthony Pettis. Again, all of the vast majority of these guys that I talk about, I think are really respectable people, but like, man, did he ever live up to the name Showtime? He became, I remember watching Anthony Pettis in the UFC. I went back and watched his WEC fights, and I got so hyped at that Showtime kick. I watched that entire fight. I cheered for Anthony Pettis probably in every single fight. He became the champion. He didn't reign champion for long, but at the end of the day, every single time that Anthony Pettis comes in there, it's crazy violence, insane martial arts. He's always trying fun stuff. I'm a fan of both him and his brother, but I do like Anthony Pettis more. And it's sad, like, at this point in my martial arts, like, or my MMA fan career, it's sad that a lot of some of my favorite fighters are getting to the age where they're retiring now. It sucks, man, but what can you do? Anthony Pettis always brought it. Has Anthony Pettis ever had a boring fight? I don't think he has, man. I don't think he has, but I love watching this guy. Love watching this guy. You know what's funny, too, is it was always fun watching Anthony Pettis because if you guys happen to be coming to this channel as somebody who's never seen it before, I often watch fights with my family, and my dad hates Showtime. And so it's so funny because I sit down, I'm like cheering so hard for Anthony Pettis to win. My dad's just like laughing whenever he loses, and it makes for a really good time. Same thing happens with Darren Till, but Darren Till's not on this list. My dad can't stand Darren Till, and understandably so, but my mom and I sit back and we're like, come on, Darren, let's go, Darren. But Anthony Pettis sitting at number 19. Continuing on a little bit, I guess it's more tragic than we can call Kelvin Gastelum because Kelvin just a little bit of wasted potential. Somebody who has fallen, picking himself up, and recently he's been on the incline, but hopefully it stays that way. Number 18 is Jason Miller. Talk about entertainment, man. Became a fan of this guy with Bully Beatdown, been following his career since, watched his fights back in the day, gave GSP a run for his money. He just has a really fun style, and while he didn't necessarily make a name for himself as like one of the greatest fighters or anything like that, the dude could really, really turn it on. And every single time that you saw him fight, man, it was always an absolute, he always, like I said, he always brought it. It was always fun. The energy was great. I love watching Jason Miller fight. He is at number 18 on the list we have going on here. But let's continue on to another fighter who always brought it to the octagon. Number 17, Matt Brown. I love his story. The person who he became. And man, this was one of the most underrated fighters when it came to excitement level of all time. Everybody always talked about guys like Robbie Lawler back in the day, Rory McDonald, and I feel like everybody always skipped over Matt Brown for this kind of era of excitement. Matt Brown brought technique, he brought all of the violence in the world, and while his age, he started to become a little bit more of a fan favorite, but I feel like while he was around, I felt like I was the only person going around saying like, hey, Matt Brown's one of my favorite fighters ever. Always cheering for this dude. Really respectable guy. He very knowledgeable about the sport. Always brought the fight. Fought the toughest of the tough, man. Like, this dude was pure excitement. Always cheered for Matt Brown when he was in the octagon. He's sitting at number 17 on the list we have going on over here. But let's continue on to number 16, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Over the years, and I've said this on the channel before, when Stephen Thompson first busted in the UFC, I thought he was so fake because he was such a nice guy, and I was like, okay, what is this guy doing, man? I hated him. I couldn't stand it. But as I watched more of Stephen Thompson, as I watch his YouTube channel, as I watch interviews, as I've watched everything regarding Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, I've come to realize that it's not fake. The dude's actually just a really, really solid guy. And since then, I've completely changed my tune on Wonderboy. Very easy to cheer for. He's always brought some really, really great technique into the octagon. One of those karate guys that had success, so he brought a unique ability to fight. And the dude was an animal. Like I said, he's in his, like we talk about now, he's in his old age, but he had some phenomenal fights back in the day. One of the true nice guys over in the UFC, but let's continue on, guys. We've hit the number 15 spot. Number 15, we have Daniel Cormier sitting at. My mom and I love watching this guy. Again, great person, family man, like Daniel Cormier. If he didn't retire too late, he could have went down as the greatest fighter of all time, potentially. Could you imagine if he just retired a double champ, man? Such a missed opportunity. I love Daniel Cormier. He's funny, great commentary. We've only gotten to know more about him throughout the years. And I will say, I was a fan of Daniel Cormier before it was cool to like Daniel Cormier, because everybody, for some twisted, weird reason, you followers, you only like people who are winning. Weirdos. Everybody was hating on this guy just because he wasn't John Jones, which is crazy to me. Love watching Daniel Cormier fight. The dude's an animal. He brought all the technique in the world. He ended up winning titles even though he was overweight. Like, he's easy to cheer for. Talk about a guy who is insanely easy to cheer for. We have Daniel Cormier. Continuing on to number 14, we have Chris Weidman. Now, I know he isn't popular right now. Okay, I know. And I had a really, really salty taste left in my mouth after that last performance that he had. And I know he's fighting in the upcoming weekend, depending on when you're seeing this. At the time of recording this video, his last fight was against his eye poke TKO, and he was celebrating it. Ridiculously weird. I hated that. But, like, at the end of the day, for all of the years that we've seen Weidman not only in the cage, but on TV, he's shown to be an awesome guy. So maybe it was just a moment. I don't know. We don't have an excuse for it over here. It just sucks because this guy was a great fighter. Again, I don't want to repeat myself for all these fighters. Easy to cheer for. I've been a fan of it since he came onto the UFC. I predicted him correctly to defeat Anderson Silva. And by the way, Silva was only clowning around because he was getting dominated in that fight. I will stand by that, and I've said that a million times over on the channel. But anyways, like I said, man, Chris Weidman's awesome. He's really low-key funny, too. I love watching him on the weigh-in show. Another thing to point back to Daniel Cormier, too, like, he's a really cool guy. I enjoy watching him on the mic, in the octagon. Technique's all there. He should retire at this point, but of course, he is one of my favorite fighters. Let's continue on to number 13. We have Brandon Moreno. Still shining in his career at the time of recording this video. I think there's a younger picture of him, though, which is a little bit strange. But regardless, like, again, I love how much he talks about his family. I love how he's just, like, you look at Brandon Moreno and I go, dude, that guy's awesome, because he comes in, he fights with all of his heart. He's getting better every single time we see him in the octagon. It's so easy to cheer for the guy where it's like, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day I will be UFC champion. And like, watching him actually accomplish that dream was something really special. Now he's sitting nice. He has a good contract, making money for his family, buying Legos, doing whatever he wants. Like, I love watching Brandon Moreno fight. I love him as a guy. Like, very easy to cheer for. Inside and outside of the octagon cage, I love watching Brandon Moreno. Let's continue on to number 12, Paul Felder. I've gotten to know him a little bit more throughout the commentary. We've seen Paul Felder's funny side. We've seen his analytical side. We've seen him just talking in general. But before that, this dude was an animal in the cage. So much fun. Went through some of the toughest wars. All of the respect in the world for not only his opponents, everybody revolved in his corners, kind of like you see with Charles Oliveira, who shockingly isn't really on this list. I always like watching Charles Oliveira fight, but there's guys that I like more than watching. But regardless, not about Charles Oliveira. Paul Felder had some amazing performances. And what really hit home too was the time that he ended up retiring, where he's like, I got a family at home. And we were all watching that sitting back, where it's like, yeah, it is quite the brutal sport. Cares a lot about his kids, cares a lot about his family. He's doing a great job on the mic. He's probably one of my favorite commentators. We did have a video ranking that, but he's definitely up there. I still think Kenny Florian's my favorite, but Paul Felder is definitely up there. Love this dude in the MMA space, no matter where he's at. Paul Felder, sitting at number 12. Let's continue on. A little bit more of the same, to be honest with you. Number 11 is Michael Chiesa. Now, is he the most exciting fighter? No. But I do like Michael Chiesa. Not only has he created one of the greatest memes in MMA history, and don't you ever talk about my mom, okay? I love that, and we don't do it so much recently, but we carried that meme for years, man. Don't you ever talk about my mom. Don't you ever talk about my mom. Like, it's weird because Michael Chiesa, I do like him as a guy, right? But I hold like kind of a nostalgic memory every time I watch Michael Chiesa because one of my uncles who doesn't watch MMA anymore, I had a really good memory with him. Actually, Michael Chiesa's UFC debut, I believe it was, I was watching and I had a really good night with one of my uncles, and we saw this Michael Chiesa guy for the first time. Don't know why. Every time I look at Michael Chiesa fighting, it kind of takes me back to that one night at my uncle's, and that's why I kind of weirdly have good feelings whenever Michael Chiesa's in the octagon. I know it's a weird thing to draw back to, but it's just one thing that I remember, and I was a kid. So, you know, when you were kids, there are certain little things that you hold to your heart, and Michael Chiesa, watching him fight for the first time with my uncle, was one of those fighters. My uncle liked him. I liked him. Followed his career. He's doing a great job on the analyst desk. Like, very easy to cheer for. He created a great meme. He's a great guy. I love watching Michael Chiesa fight, man. I love watching him inside and outside the octagon. Michael Chiesa sitting at number 11. Number 10 is a very unpopular one. We have a couple unpopular ones over here, okay? Johnny Hendricks. Now, I know, and this is the guy that I was talking about really when people talk about PED use, and it really does seem like he was on PEDs, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, it seemed like everybody was on there, so who am I to just dog on somebody for that? The reason that I talk so much about John Jones being excluded from the GOAT conversation on PEDs, you're talking about the greatest fighter of all time. Johnny Hendricks, though, was one of the most underappreciated fighters of all time. I felt so bad for him because he should have gotten the championship. He should have been the guy to actually really beat GSP. He was so exciting. He always imposed his will. Huge power, crazy wrestling, went through some wars. Those fights with Robbie Lawler, the fights with Matt Brown. There you go. Every single time Johnny Hendricks entered the octagon, man, it was nothing but pure excitement. That, and I just like him. He's a happy guy. It's easy to cheer for him once he wins, just like Brandon Moreno. Like, when you win, I just like kind of feel good for him, man. And I don't know why he never picked up a ton of fans, man, because probably because he didn't trash talk all that much, but I loved watching Johnny Hendricks fight. One of my favorite fighters of all time, breaking into the top 10. You want to talk about another unpopular one? I'm ready to hear it in the comments. Colby Covington. Okay. Let me explain myself. Colby Covington is one of those guys that I can't help but laugh at every single time. Not laugh at. Like, oh, people laugh at Covington as a joke, and I know. I'm salty about his performance against Edwards too. I had a whole group of people over for that fight, by the way. Okay, Colby. I come from the Xbox 360 trash talk era when I was a kid, and Colby's trash talk really brings me back to that. I love how there's the line, and then Colby goes over the line. I love that, like, he just insults you to your absolute core, bringing up things that you shouldn't be bringing up, and it's just so stupid where it's like my friends and I always talk about, like, we still talk about this to this day. I take that sandwich. When he was arguing about Kamaru Usman about a sandwich, like, if I make a sandwich, he's gonna make it the same way. Like, it's so stupid. It's so Xbox 360 era that I can't help but enjoy Colby Covington. Plus, I've actually never thought he was a boring fighter. I love and I find it fascinating when you have these high pressure wrestlers and nobody's able to do anything against it. Now, people have had success against Colby Covington, but the dude, for the vast majority of his fights, has brought it. When he's not on his shtick, he seems like a great guy. You have all of these fans talking about how Colby's actually off camera a completely different person, and we've seen little bits and pieces of that. I've watched some sit down interviews with Colby where he doesn't have his persona on. Seems like an okay guy. Like, I enjoy him. I enjoy Colby Covington whenever he's around. Joaquin Buckley fight's coming up, and I'm sure that it's going to be really fun to see. Like, Colby Covington's going to bring the excitement, man. Is it the best trash talk? No. But is the excitement level there? Yes. I like Colby Covington. I cheer for Colby Covington, and he is one of the most entertaining fighters, in my opinion. Number 9's at Colby Covington. I'm ready for that. But speaking of entertainment, not on the mic, but purely inside the octagon, number 8, we have Pedro Munoz. You want to talk about a guy who brings in absolute wars every single time that he comes in there, someone who just tries to impose his will, trying to appease all of the fans in the octagon. This dude has been sitting in the rankings of the objectively toughest division in all of combat sports, not always winning, but always putting on amazing, amazing performances. If you want to talk about underappreciated fighter in the UFC or MMA in general, Pedro Munoz is absolutely one of the most underappreciated fighters. This dude has been through war after war after war, giving nothing but respect through it. Pedro Munoz is awesome. I love watching him fight, and I still cheer for Pedro Munoz, and I was still hoping that he would make a title run. I've always thought he was a little bit underrated, but man, to beat Pedro Munoz, he brings you through a war. Love watching Pedro Munoz, man. Love watching him. Always cheer for him. He's sitting at number 8. Now let's continue on to number 7. A little bit more of the same. Drew Dober. Very underappreciated. Hardcore MMA fans understand what Drew Dober does for all of us. He puts everything on the line. He comes in, and while he has been fighting a little bit more technical as of recently, the dude has put his body on the line for so many of our viewing experiences. Drew Dober, I know he just started a family, fighting his heart out to provide for his family, and that's something he was speaking about in recent interviews. Is Drew Dober, like, he's had a brand new motivation ever since he had a brand new kid, and it's something I can personally relate to because I just had my own kid. But Drew Dober, man, he always comes in, positive energy, always respectful, always fighting his heart out, trying to make money for his family. Like, Drew Dober is awesome. I can't help but respect and really, really, really appreciate Drew Dober, and he's been putting on fights like that for years, man. Years. This dude has taken so much damage, given so much damage. Very, very easy to cheer for. He's one of my favorite fighters. And like I was talking about Pedro Munoz, he is one of the most underappreciated fighters of all time. Nothing would make me happier watching this sport than to see Drew Dober actually go on a solid title run. Number 6, and if I asked anybody else to make this list, I would imagine that this person would be on this list. How can you not cheer for Robert Whittaker? Like we were just talking about Drew Dober, family man, exciting, champion, taking on the toughest of the tough. All of the fighters. He's been a champion for a very, very long time. He's a gamer. He has his own podcast now. Anything that's related to Robert Whittaker, in my opinion, positive vibes are brought. And if you want to talk about breaking down anything about martial arts, Robert Whittaker's amazing at what he does. I love how he takes losses. I love that it's just like I don't know how to really describe it. I don't want to say like the dude's just living life, but like his loss against Chimaev, he's like, what can you do? He laughs about it. The dude has some of the best spirits in the entirety of the UFC, and I think that attitude about Robert Whittaker is something that a lot of people should walk through life with. He's doing his thing. He's getting his checks. He's providing for his family, and if he loses, he loses. Nothing he can do about it. He's just going to focus, sit down, and become a better fighter, and he's already game planning to be the best fighter. Robert Whittaker is, in MMA terms, somebody to completely look up to, and that's why he's sitting at number 6 over here on the list that we have. Continuing on to number 5, we have Carlos Condit. I'll break this down very, very simply for you because I've told it many times on the channel. Carlos Condit was the first fighter that I ever became a fan of. My first, and I've watched UFC fights before this, but I remember when I was a kid, I was playing football all night, and I came home, and for whatever reason, my dad always watched UFC with my mom or my uncle, right? But for whatever reason, I came home from my dog's next to me, I have to spell it, the P-A-R-K. I was playing some football, and my dad was watching some fights. It was the fight with him versus George St. Pierre. At the time, I didn't know. And he was just by himself. He was sitting on his laptop, so I was like, hey, Dad. And he just invited me to watch the fight with him. And then he explained to me, this guy, George St. Pierre, he explained to me who Carlos Condit was. And I sat down, and it happened to be pretty well the beginning of the fight. I think it was like 1 minute in. So we watched it together. And this was the birth of me becoming a hardcore MMA fan. I still remember going crazy after my dad explained to me how crazy of a fighter George St. Pierre is. Carlos Condit landing that head kick. I remember it vividly. I remember my dad's reaction. I remember where we were sitting at. I remember what he was eating. I remember that moment very, very vividly. And it sucked because we ended up cheering for Carlos Condit as the fight went on. From that moment, I never missed a martial arts card. I wanted to participate in martial arts. I was looking at not only the UFC, other fight organizations. My dad told me about Bellator, Strikeforce, WEC. I loved what I watched so much that I became a hardcore fight fan, and throughout the entirety of the career of Carlos Condit, I was cheering for Carlos Condit. He was the first fighter that I ever became a fan of. The Natural Born Killer is a very, very well way to put his nickname. The dude brought it every single time. Exciting fights, and it is an absolute shame that he didn't go down as an undisputed champion. That was completely robbed from him, but Carlos Condit, man, he's responsible for really bringing me into the sport for that performance that he put on against GSP. Let's continue on to number 4, Glover Teixeira. How can you not cheer for this guy? One of the most wholesome guys in the entirety of the UFC. He only got better with his old age, and every single time that he fought when he went on that win streak, I would pick against him because he's old. And then my dad and I actually sat back and we were like, I'm not cheering against Glover Teixeira anymore. I'm just not. He was easy to win. And Glover Teixeira, on another note, is one of those guys that I wholeheartedly believe is actually a very good person. I really believe that to my core, and what was really proven that to me was against Anthony Smith. When that audio came out where he's pounding Anthony Smith and he's saying, I'm sorry, Anthony, it's part of the job. He knocked out Anthony Smith's teeth. He picked them up and delivered them to his corner. What kind of person would do that? We know that Glover Teixeira is fighting because he must. I can't help but respect that. I can't. I wholeheartedly believe he's a great guy. And one of the most wholesome moments in UFC history, which is a video that I want to make one, by the way, is when he actually ended up getting that title. My mom and I are big fans of Glover Teixeira. You have no idea, like, the cheering party that we had when he actually got it done against Jan Blachowicz. Like, John, we were like, Johnny, like, yo, he did it. Like, Glover Teixeira at 42. Like, we were going crazy. Glover Teixeira is one of my favorite fighters of all time. I love watching this guy perform, and I wholeheartedly believe that he is, and I wholeheartedly believe he's a really good guy. You've seen what he done for Alex Pereira too, running the gym. The gym's very successful. Like, again, all these guys, in my opinion, are pretty easy to cheer for. Let's talk about number 3, Cub Swanson. And I didn't say that right as I was doing my transition over here. Cub Swanson, man. I've gotten to know this guy more so at the end, towards the end of his career. But not only is this guy, like, every single time that he came in, he was putting on fun fights. I've watched Cub Swanson ever since, like, I can't remember the first fight that I watched of Cub Swanson, but I made sure. Well, I mean, I didn't really miss many events, but I made sure that I was sitting down. I was ready to watch a Cub Swanson fight. His fight against Doo Ho Choi, and he's still, like, performing very, very well in his old age. But now we're listening to him on podcasts and stuff. We're listening to him in interviews. And every single time that I hear Cub Swanson speak, I can't help but just have more respect for him. Not only his story, his gym, how much he actually cares about the fighters that he's mentoring. Like, again, like we were talking about Glover Teixeira, I think this guy's just a good dude. He's very intelligent in the game. He's really worth listening to, and I would like to see, and we've seen just a little bit of it, but I would love for the UFC to give Cub Swanson a chance as an analyst, whether it's on just the desk when we're in between fights or actually in the commentary booth. Like, he's good from the little bit that we've seen. I just really enjoy how much Cub really cares about his talent, breaks down the martial arts, talked about his life story, man. Like, I've always enjoyed Cub Swanson. Not only that is, he has put on some of the greatest fights in UFC history for us, and he is still doing that to this day. I know I can't remember when he's fighting, actually. He's fighting kind of soon, and I am going to be sitting down. I'm going to be cheering the hell out of for Cub Swanson to win, man. Love watching Cub Swanson fight, okay? Let's continue on to number 2. Let me explain this one. TJ Dillashaw. Now, here's the problem, okay? A long time ago, I made a tier list video ranking all of my favorite fighters, and I was still kind of, like, upset with TJ Dillashaw for finding out that he was a big cheater, right? The performance enhancing, like, it wasn't a tainted supplement. He admitted to doing it, and I know that it could have just been for a one-off fight, but regardless, I've tried, and I've been so disappointed in TJ Dillashaw because TJ Dillashaw is the fighter that since he burst on the scene, since he became, like, champion, I was following his career, like, really, really hard since he became champion. I modeled my own fighting style after TJ Dillashaw. That is my main style when I perform in MMA. I've done countless hours of tape study on TJ Dillashaw, practicing his movement, practicing his combinations, and it legitimately kind of hurt me to my core to find out somebody that I looked up to and respected in the sense of martial arts, that I found out that he was a cheater. Fortunately, the technique still applies, the movement still applies, and I still do have my ultimate fighting style. But it was such a major disappointment, and I was disappointed with him, and I still am, to be honest with you, because again, like, some guy that you respected so much that you modeled your own fighting style afterwards. It actually hurt to hear that he was a cheater. But as time's gone on, as the years have gone by, I find myself, I can't help but still like him. I've only been listening to him on more podcasts, listening to him on social media, him on the Jackson podcast. Like, he's real. He breaks down fights so perfectly. I love that gym. I can't help but still enjoy TJ Dillashaw, man. I can't help it. I want to, like, be upset with him and I know at the end of the day it doesn't matter. Like, I'm just a guy behind my microphone, but, like, I want to still, like, oh man, I can't like TJ after that, but I can't help it. I just do. I've spent so much of my life, like, modeling my fight style after him. And at the end of the day, even if he took some PEDs, I'm hoping that it was just for one fight. We'll never find out, right? I was hoping it was just for one fight. I was hoping that it was just so he could just get across that weight cut. I can't help but still enjoy him, man. I can't help it. He's still so great on the mic. He's a great fighter. I still like to listen to his analytical opinion. Like, I can't help but still enjoy TJ Dillashaw. He's my number 2 slot, and I would love to know what you guys think about that, by the way. But there is one fighter above all of them that really, really stands out for me. While I talked about Carlos Condit being the first fighter I was ever a fan of, I think this guy's been my favorite fighter ever since that I can remember, and that is Chael Sonnen. Like I was talking about with Colby Covington, but better. This dude has always brought it in the cage, and people forget, do the Joe Rogan, people forget, man, Chael Sonnen, when he was younger, and I know we can get in the PED talk again, this dude brought it. This dude brought it every single time. He imposed his will, and while Chael wasn't the best fighter, he tried with all of his heart to get the job done each time. But he was so good on the mic. He's so funny. And he is the first guy, and fighters are now just modeling themselves after Chael Sonnen in the sense of like on the microphone. You can see like Colby Covington's trying to implement what Chael Sonnen did. But the problem was, back in the day, Chael was so well spoken that he was so good at insulting people without swearing. He got all of the eyes on the sport. While he didn't reach to the Conor McGregor levels of the world, like he was the Conor McGregor before Conor McGregor, all eyes were on Chael Sonnen. He did a fantastic job with the trash talk. He backed it up in the sense that he always showed up. He always performed. Has Chael Sonnen ever been pulled out of a fight, man? I always enjoyed Chael Sonnen. I enjoy him, like, whether he's an analyst now, he's been doing some commentary work. I enjoy his YouTube channel. While I have been watching a little bit less over the years, especially when he first started it, I listened to Your Welcome when it first came about. I've always liked Chael as a guy. I've always really, really liked Chael as a guy. He was always entertaining. One of the reasons that I became a super fan of this sport was because of Chael Sonnen, and he is my favorite fighter in UFC history, guys. I would love to know what you guys think about my list. I know I'm going to hear about it, Colby, and I'm probably going to hear about it, TJ, as well. But these are the top 25 fighters that I am a big, big fan of, and I gave the reasons why. And I would love this, if you guys have some time, drop down below if you have any lists, top 5, top 25, whatever you guys want to do. I'll be responding in the comments. Thank you so much for being here and watching. If you guys are interested in that video where I talked about ranking all of the commentators, you can check out that video right here. I'd love to have you guys over there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.